Good morning, Karameli. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. Thank you.
I'm
It's
so glad to
Friday.
have Karameli Faaee here with me. I had the great fortune to meet Karameli in an entrepreneurial workshop that we took together. And I know her as a pure spirit. That's just the best way I can describe her. She radiates kindness, openness, curiosity. It was only later that I learned about how accomplished she is. She is a USA Women's Rugby World Cup captain. What? That's crazy. World Cup captain. She made history by becoming the first woman to coach in men's professional rugby in the United States. She currently coaches rugby for middle schoolers and men in New York City. She is training to be a transformational coach, which I have no doubt she will be extraordinarily successful. She's born to do that. And speaking of born, she was born in California, then moved to Samoa. Then a lot of her upbringing was in New Zealand and then landed in the US. So a world traveler in terms of her upbringing. And I couldn't be happier to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Of course. Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. I love this idea, this podcast that you're having. I think sharing stories is how we are meant to connect as people. So it helps us realize we're not alone, find a sense of belonging, and we get to show more, or at least experience compassion more when we realize that even though we may not have been raised in the same environment, a lot of times when we share stories, we find deeper connection. So I love this. Congratulations. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you. And man, you just hit the heart of what I hope this podcast does accomplish. So thank you for that. Tell us a little bit about your professional journey, what you're doing professionally.
Currently, I am working with Nyack Rugby, the men's club. So that's New York Athletic Club. They play in the top league in the US. So it's a very competitive team, which I enjoy. And then I also coach middle schoolers. So my job is for a nonprofit called Rugby for All. We go around different schools and we pitch the idea of flag-rugby, so the flag version, to New York City schools, and we just give them a different sport that's not a typical American sport, which a lot of the kids like, kind of evens the playing field, you know. And the flag allows boys and girls to play together, keeps the game very dynamic. And then the transformational coaching, it's all linked because I feel my purpose in this world is to support people highlight their superpower or how significant they are and remind them that we're all born whole, perfect, and complete. And it is due to our experiences growing up that really shape us as adults. So I love the opportunity to work with the middle schoolers because I know that's the age where they're starting to develop all of that and starting to navigate the world. And the hour and a half they spend with me once a week is about them experiencing joy. It's creating a space for them to be playful, be curious, and have a good time. It's very rewarding and impactful and very exhausting at the same time. I'm very fortunate because even with the men's club, they're adults, but I get that perspective of seeing how alike the two groups are with certain activities. So the ones that I do with the kids, I'll sometimes use it on my adult teams and you see them tap into their inner child and it's beautiful. For a moment, they're not in their head about looking good or don't want to mess up. They're just going for it. And yeah, that's basically all I want to do in my life with everyone I work with.
Yeah, that's so cool because it's interesting. It struck me as you were talking that not everyone could relate so deeply to both middle school kids and adult men. And I think it ties back to what you were saying, which is you just see people's humanity and you are looking for their superpower. And that I think puts you in a unique position to work with just about anyone and really bring out the best in them. So that's really beautiful. It's great to see you doing all of that. What about personally, maybe something that's an interest or that people may not know that you might want to share?
Yeah, navigating and getting closer to my authentic self and hearing more what it is that feels good in my body. I often think about wanting to support specifically people who have survived sexual abuse. That was That's something that I experience.
Mm.
And it's not a story that I share a lot, but it is something that is rooted in who I am and how it shaped me. So I think eventually through sport, I want to work with groups who experience similar situations, especially at a young age, only because growing up, I wish there was more people I could talk to about it. I wish I had the tools to not let it develop a very negative self dialogue I had for myself. It really had me thinking everything was my fault, and there was a lot of unworthiness coming up when you're feeling that you couldn't share and that you're alone, and you can sometimes, without knowing it, be a victim to that story. And sometimes it won't allow you to really produce or create what you like in this world. And it's definitely often from a scenario where you were not in control. So I'm very interested in working with that in that domain soon.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I know that you have a foundation in mind that we can talk more about. Just to pull the curtain back for people who are listening, Karameli shared that piece of her history with me just a few minutes ago prior to recording the podcast when we were sound checking. And her commitment to telling the story and being fully authentic in her story as a way to inspire other people. I'm just amazed by the courage and bravery and the beautiful, back to pure intention of what you're doing today by telling this story that you don't typically tell. And I want to thank you for that. I know you're anything but a victim, and I know you are who you are because of all of your history. I still want to say I'm very sorry you went through that, and just couldn't feel more, I don't know, privileged that you were sharing this story today. It takes a lot, and I thank you for that. So we'll shift for a minute to some of the other things that you identify with. You want to share your pronouns first?
Yes, she, her, but also they, them feels good too. Yeah.
And what do you want people to know about who you are and you're navigating your career story? What are some of your descriptors?
If I had to pick a label, I'm queer, Polynesian or Indigenous or BIPOC
Yeah.
and super fluid. I think it is an interesting question, and I'm really enjoying seeing the shift in the world at being more free and more open to not limiting people based on physical attributes or you're a girl, so this is what you should wear. Yeah, I always appreciate the question. And it's always something that I sit with and I go, oh, how do I feel about all of it? Because, we're always evolving too. I think 2 years ago, I would have just said she, her. But even she never felt like, I don't know. I remember one time going, is it she anymore? I'm not sure. Playing rugby, we talked about this a lot in our rugby team because when we travel, you go through the security line and you get patted down and there's a male one and a female. And the amount of times we would get the male ones pat us down because they would just look at our shoulders or our height. But we all have long hair. I remember one guy was patting me down and I was like, shouldn't she be doing this? I was very chill about it because I don't get offended because I'm like, these people are just on automatic. A lot of it's just assuming the corner of their eye. They used to like me. And then I just was like, why am I getting uptight about it? He's not doing it on purpose. He legit thought I was a guy and came and patted me down. But I think for me, it's wishing that they would just be more mindful and have a real look and maybe ask if they're not sure. Nothing offends me anymore. Just rolling with it all at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think talking about it, talking about pronouns, talking about how we identify, I think the more we do that, the more comfortable these conversations become. And the more awareness is, like you said, you just wish these people were a little more mindful of what they were doing. Hopefully we can create a little bit more of that mindfulness by just having the conversations. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
We've had so many really thought-provoking conversations in the past, and this could go in so many directions. So I'm excited to see where it goes. The podcast is a space where underrepresented people talk about the extra layers they navigate as we wind our way into the already complicated career landscape. In your case, rugby goes back to a time in your life when you were very young. So your career and your life are very unified. I just want to see where you want to take us in terms of the conversation. What's the story or stories you want to start talking about?
Oh, yeah. So I love that you just highlighted that for me. I think rugby is integrated in my life, which probably is what's allowing me to just show up as I am in every space. Which one? We can go with, let's go with the first female to coach a pro men's team. My first initial reaction was like, wait, what? It's like 2000s. Like, how is this not a thing before? I remember I was in judgment of it. Then eventually I shifted to, okay, there's an opportunity here. It's just the title. I know a lot of women who have coached men, but it's a technicality where it just wasn't a pro men's team. So I was very, very honored. And I think what came up for me was there was a lot of things that I didn't have the skills, and I realized I didn't know how to ask for support. I didn't know what support looked like. I didn't know how to network. And I feel like these were things that, growing up as a Samoan kid, our whole life was just church, school, family on repeat. There are often times where I didn't know what to expect walking into spaces, and I basically just went off my instinct. And it was okay. When I think back at it now, it's, damn, imagine if I grew up in an environment where I had people in my family who could support me and like, hey, so when you go to this meeting, get this done, make sure you have all this ready. It reminds me of first people that go to college, first family members that go to college, at how even your family don't know how to support because it's all kind of foreign territory. So that came up for me a lot. I'm someone who's pretty hard on myself. That's part of my healing. So I never felt like I was the right person to represent all women rugby. And I made up that whenever I spoke, everyone was like, as if I'm speaking on behalf of every female coach. And it's not true, but it was an interpretation that I made up. And it really just had me in some dark places in my head. The feelings of not being good enough. Why me? And tokenism, all of this stuff came up that was really tricky to navigate. And what was beautiful during the time too is rugby had it. So it was all on ESPNW. And then these other big sports started looking at, hey, do we have women staff? And to me, I was like, this little sport rugby in the scheme of American sport really moved the needle. I feel like just the headline alone had other sports reviewing their own backyard because it was just time. Why hadn't this happened before?
Right.
I had a whole community that were willing to support, but I didn't know I needed support and I didn't know how to ask for it. I think years later when I would connect with people and I would bring up this sport, they're like, yeah, we were all here for you. Anything you need. It all sounds great, but I didn't know what it would look like to be successful. So all I focused was just on the sport. And then, yeah, I think even captaining USA, when my coach asked me and he offered me the position in the parking lot over in Chula Vista, which is the Olympic Training Center, I just cried. I was like, you want me to captain the USA team? And he's like, yeah, I do. You're the only one who really challenges us. What was interesting about him saying that is I definitely compared to the roster I'm going to speak up no matter what. It doesn't matter if I lose this jersey. Like what mattered to me was speaking up about anything. And what was hard about training side by side with the men's team is we just saw the difference with the gear they have, the gear we have in terms of resources. And there was a lot of things in our faces that reminded me again of how women's sport just wasn't up there. So I think for me, it was just anytime the coaches, I don't know, would say something like the roster's coming out at 8 and it didn't come out till 8:30. I'm like, coach, these women are hanging by their phones. Just little things that made him say, you know what? You're going to captain. And I was just like, this is crazy. That happens to me a lot where I get promoted very quickly or I find myself in a leadership position. And it always comes back to me doubting myself because something didn't feel right. And then I would just say it.
What's interesting to me is this combination of being the person that would speak up you would just know intuitively that something didn't feel right and something needed to be said. So on the one hand, you were the one to speak up. And then on the other hand, I'm hearing that there are understandably situations where you felt like you didn't know how to speak up. You didn't know how to ask for help. You didn't know who to reach out to. That push and pull must have been a very interesting thing to navigate.
It was. And I sometimes don't know how I got through those 2 years. When I think back, and this is where, I get to trust my contacts in terms of knowing that I always show up the best I have at the time. But it was a stressful time. I felt alone. There were some reactions to stuff that I was like, oh my God, that was all because I was just so tight about not feeling I was doing enough, representing the women enough, representing Samoans, representing queer people. It was just so me to make it heavy. And and everything has to be such a grind sometimes. I don't know if that's a cultural thing, but I know for me, I think growing up, or at least being competitive, thing had to suck to reward yourself. So if it didn't suck, I almost didn't value it. So there's a little bit of like self-sabotage, and I shouldn't be here anyway. So if it doesn't go well, then the whole not having high expectations because you'll be disappointed. Oh my God, all my limiting conversation, internal dialogue. And where I'm at now, when I work with athletes and I hear those sayings, I know exactly where you are. And that's why I'm very grateful for all of it, everything I've ever experienced, even what I shared earlier. It's weird to say because you don't want to gaslight yourself and be like, it was meant to happen because otherwise I wouldn't do it. But it's more, it did happen. And who you are authentically, you use the skills you have. So it's looking back and go, oh, I was able to overcome that using these skills. And how is that transferable into sport? How is that transferable into my relationships now? And I used to look back at that young girl and cry and feel bad for her. And I think I just look back at her now and see her strength.
It's amazing. Look, realistically, a woman in sport, BIPOC, Polynesian, brown, grew up in New Zealand in a white community where you were a minority. We've had conversations about that. Queer and having lived through abuse, not being on a kind of professional path per se, just being on a high level sports performance path, but then finding yourself being offered these positions of authority and visibility and not really having the training, so to speak, or the experiences to support it. And then being so tough on yourself, it makes perfect sense that those were a challenging couple of years. And my question is, what in reflecting do you see as the things that helped you pivot, the skills that helped you pivot from this being a stressful time when you felt alone and carrying a big burden to where you now can look back with gratitude at the journey that you've had?
Yeah. My come from during that moment was don't let people down. And that's obviously from my trauma of being let down as a kid.
Yeah.
And how I felt, I don't want anyone to feel like that. Like I made up that if I let people down, it's going to be how I felt let down. So coming from that scarcity, you can get work done, but it's just not sustainable, And then I found that I was not connecting with anyone, my friends, my family. There was no real joy. There was joy in the work that I did, but it was very surface level because to my core, it was all about doing, a lot of doing. If I just physically give myself, that's all I need. Whereas where I'm at now, I'm still coaching and everything, but my come from is just joy. My come from is I get to do this because my purpose is my gifts get to serve my immediate circles. And I feel free in my mind. I feel free in my body. And oh my God, while I was dealing with that, I was also coming off of being an elite athlete. I was retired I didn't know what to do in the gym anymore. And there's no support there, mental support, at least in my time. There was no check-ins from USA Rugby or whoever to be like, hey, so you were committed to this team for however many years, and now that you're out there on your own. We don't get that. As a transformational coach, I think about wanting to support athletes, the lead up to the role, when you're in that environment, and then even the transition out, because they're all such pivotal moments. It takes a lot of self-awareness to not make it your identity. And then when that goes from you, you're having to reinvent yourself,
Yeah.
you
It's another
know?
layer.
Yeah. Wow. I'm really grateful for this conversation. I've not thought back at it from where I am now.
I'm grateful too. This is coming up for me, and then you tell me if it resonates. You know, you talked about not letting people down. You have this very strong inner knowing of right and wrong. And when it came to standing up for other people at this time in your life, that was instinctive. No question. The first one to jump up. And then you, at that time in your life, weren't able, ready yet to extend that same grace to yourself. And okay, she's nodding. And at some point, because you do have such a strong inner knowing, it sounds like you realized if you were this person for other people, that you should be this person for yourself as well, right? That joy and connectedness, et cetera, were things that made sense in your body as opposed to what you were feeling. And that started to help you pivot for yourself. How does that all land?
Oh, that was beautifully put. Yes. I think my favorite analogy of where I am now is the saying to fill your cup up. So it's for me, I want to serve from the overflow. So it's love myself so hard that it's just flowing out, and then allows me to have it all. And then it also allows me to just exist. By me just existing and accepting all of me, every part of me, and loving all of it has allowed me to still coach, but I feel way more connected with my athletes. I feel more connected with anyone I work with. And it's supporting me also in being present, because during that time too, I would be here having this conversation, but I'm already thinking about, oh, but I've got to go to this other thing after this. And I'm probably still not even over what I did before we were talking. I would do an interview, and the interview would just repeat itself in my head for hours, which meant whatever I was doing during that time didn't have my full attention, because I was still reevaluating what I said. Did it come out right? Did I hit all the things? Did I miss anyone out? I get a lot of good feedback that you're always self-reflecting, you're always self-improving. And on the other side of the coin is just, you're always just self-judging. Because if I'm judging myself, I'm definitely judging others. So yeah, another part that's been supportive and just showing up for myself.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought up presence and showing up for yourself. It's so important. And sounds like that's the pivot point for you at the crux of how you transformed everything. The focus on being present is something that is very front and center for me. And it's been a focus of mine over the last year or so, and realizing that a lot of stress comes from replaying the past. What could I have done better? What could I have said better? Or thinking about the future, the what ifs. What if this? What if that happens? And the biggest gift you can give to yourself and the person that you're with is your presence. And what a peaceful place. You're not in the past. You're not in the future. You're just with the moment. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's been very transformational for me too. I also love that at one point you said, I get to do this in my work as opposed to have to. And I think that that's always a good kind of check is, am I doing things that I feel I have to do or get to do or want to do? And so I'm so pleased and not surprised to find you using that language. What do you say to the people that you coach when you see that they're in that space that you were in previously? I was grinding it out, and if it didn't suck, it didn't make sense, and self-sabotage. When you see it in people, how do you coach them?
Yeah, and I see it quite a bit, especially with high school girls. For me, it's really highlighting that they get to trust themselves. Yeah, it's mostly me giving them what I'm actually thinking supports them, because a lot of the times when I see them in their head, they're assuming what I'm thinking. My love language is affirmation. So I recognize that especially when athletes are working, as long as I'm like, hey, that was a great rep, you see them just surrender and you see them continue to develop. So I think for me, it's when I bring them present to what's happening by just saying something, anything. Yeah, I can sense it. And you can tell when there's a bunch of errors in a row, something's in the air here. There's energy here. Maybe there's nervousness. I just have them take a deep breath and go, look at this grass. It's beautiful. You're all amazing. You're all here for a reason. And it's just reminding them that they're there for a reason, and how they show up, as long as it's their absolute best, that's all we want. I'm not attached to how it looks. My style definitely is a lot of communication, because anyone who's coached by me knows that about me, because I feel as an athlete, bringing everyone to the present increases awareness. And then people knowing where they stand also is so key. Even if they want to know whether they're a starter or someone that's going to come off the bench. And that's something I had to learn the hard way as a coach, because my generation, we never got told anything. We would go home assuming a lot of stuff. And then when the roster comes out, oh, I'm on the team. You just didn't always know. So I coach like that. The more I learn about, wait, but how do I actually want to coach? Not coach the way I was coached, not coach the way I think they want to be coached. How do I want to communicate so that they get what it is that they want to get out of this session? They feel challenged enough and they learn that they're capable. People just want to know they're capable. It's a very dynamic skill, and I'm grateful for the question. We're all guessing out here. We're all just doing our best, showing up, but we don't always know how people experience us. Sometimes we are gifted with that feedback, but sometimes we don't really know. And then later I'll get an email or a message from a student going, you were my favorite, or I never forgot this time here. It's good to know how you're showing up, because it gives you, okay, let's keep doing this. Yeah. And maybe this is a gap. But I think short answer is I bring them to the present, just to this drill, just to these 4 cones right here. That last rep doesn't even matter anymore.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about people navigating their careers just like you're doing. It's humans interacting with each other toward a goal. And that's what we do in our careers too. And I'm hearing, a lot of thoughtfulness around communication, affirmations, being present, just like we talked about before, and telling people where they stand. You're on the roster. And I've often said in my career, clarity is kind. People just want to understand what's going on and how they fit into it and what's expected. And so I hear that as well. And I love the fact that you look at feedback, not surprisingly, as both, okay, this is going well, I'm going to keep doing this. And then maybe there's a gap, and not hearing any judgment around that. That's an opportunity. Yes. This is going well, and this is a gap that I now have an opportunity to think about and focus on because I got the feedback. So those are all beautiful takeaways for anyone in their career. Before we turn the corner into the next segment, you've been so generous with everything you've shared. Is there anything that's still on your heart that we haven't talked about, or you want to pivot over to a musical chat?
I feel like we're going to do a couple more of these in the future. I think the last thing I'll say, and this is one of my recent work-ons, like being present, is surrendering. I know that people from trauma at a young age come from instability, where you don't know what's happening from day to day. You don't know, you can't even control energy. I feel as adults that shows up in us wanting to control things. And because you feel safe there, as long as you know what's happening, you feel safe. And I think for me, and what I support my athletes in, is just surrender. I think trusting that if you work on being present, then you know you're authentic, and then you just get to not judge yourself and just surrender and have a good time.
Right.
Yeah. Surrendering has been a huge thing. That's the last thing I'll put in for that segment.
I love that. And I'm glad you also said have a good time, having fun. I found in my career also, it was so important to have fun. If you weren't having fun, then what was the point? If it felt like a grind, and trusting the process. Typically, if you do the right things for the right reasons and the right ways, success follows. And that's all you can do. And then you just give it up to the universe, so to speak, and then enjoy the moments.
Yeah. Now I'm realizing too, a lot of people have to sometimes go back and heal that part of them to even surrender. Yeah.
Yeah, you do have to do the work and go back and heal. And that's at a different time for everyone in their journey. And a super important step. And I've always admired the degree to which I know that you've done that work. So, yeah, it's great to see. All right. So we're going to shift over to the segment of the podcast that I call It's My Podcast. So there will be music. You know, music, like storytelling, I believe, really taps into our humanity, our core. It's visceral. There's a universality to it. So having said all that, if there were a song you could put in a time capsule and preserve at all costs for future generations, what would it be and why?
Oh my God. Yeah, I really appreciated this question. It's Say It To Me Now, Beth Nielsen, hands down. Not only is it a beautiful melody, but the lyrics say, if there were no barriers, say what your heart wants to say right now. I just feel like that's my vision for the world, is people to just be able to speak. And it doesn't mean only speak if it's a positive or whatever is coming up for you. How can we get to a world where people can literally express themselves and people feel safe and heard and that people will hear them? Yeah, I love that song. I choke up every time I hear it.
Yeah, I saw you do that. It's a beautiful song. It was the first time I heard it. It's right in my wheelhouse in terms of lyrics and just the beauty of her voice. She's got this crystal tone and she really, you feel the emotion when she sings it. And I always feel gifted by songs. This one really hit a note for me. So thank you for that. So we will add that to the Spotify playlist. It's going to be quite diverse. So thank you for sharing that one with us. As we're coming around the corner here, where would be the best place for people to find you?
So at the moment, my Instagram page, which is Karameli_Faaee, is where I'm most active. So please drop a message in. I will reply as soon as I can and would love to hear more stories and meet new people.
And it will be in the show notes, but I do want to make sure the people who are listening also know how to spell your name. So it's in terms of her Instagram handle, KARAMELI _Faaee, FAAEE on Instagram. She's got a beautiful Instagram account. To say that your story is inspiring is an understatement. The beauty with which you share your story and with which you've added another layer to your story that you have not, for the most part, shared prior to today is a gift. You said we'll have more conversations. I'm going to hold you to that. This has been ridiculously wonderful, and I just treasure you, and I'm very happy that you were here with us today.
Thank you so much, Auntie. That was, very mutual. I appreciate just every time those words come out in an environment like this, my body just expands. So, yeah, I love it. Thank you so much. And I would do this anytime. This was so beautiful. I feel very safe to be vulnerable, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that as well. So,
yeah.
All right, everyone. That brings this episode of Stories We Haven't Shared to a close. I believe stories are our humanity waiting to be shared, and listening makes it possible. Thanks so much for being here by our virtual campfire today. Until next time, and thank you again to Karameli. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.